So let's talk about your informative speech assignment. The first thing you should know is that the time limit is 4 to 6 minutes. If you are not between 4 and 6 minutes, you'll see here, I asked the question, was your speech between 4 and 6 minutes? If you are not between 4 and 6 minutes, then you're going to be losing some points. What does that mean? Well, if your speech is 3 minutes and 30 seconds, you will lose 5 points. If your speech is 3 minutes and 55 seconds, that's close enough to 4. You won't lose any points. But if you are kind of stretching out between 3 minutes and 30 seconds and 3 minutes and 55 seconds because you know you don't really have enough material, I might deduct some points. If your speech goes over 6 minutes, again, you will lose points. So what am I trying to get at here? I would like you to practice your speech. That's really what this is about. And I want you to practice your speech for time. And what you need to think about is practicing your speech with a stopwatch, or your phone should have a timer function, and looking to see where you are in the speech as you go. Maybe stop and look to see, okay, I'm about halfway through my speech. Oh my gosh, I've only gone a minute. That probably means I need to go back and do some more research. Or you might find you've practiced your speech and suddenly you're 6 minutes along and you look at your speech timer and you're only a halfway through your speech and you've already gotten 6 minutes. That probably means you need to figure out how to be more efficient in the way you deliver. I call that word economy. So when you're practicing your speech, you're going to pay attention to how long it takes you to deliver it. Knowing, however, that when you give your speech in front of a class, you might actually deliver it a little bit more quickly because you're nervous, or you might deliver it a little more slowly so that's why I have the range of 4 to 6 minutes. That's a 2-minute range. But I'd really like to have you practice your speech to be 5 minutes. So aim for like a 5-minute speech. And then that way you have a little bit of wiggle room if you speak more quickly or you speak more slowly. Timing in a speech is one of the most important things you need to learn how to do, because when people speak, they oftentimes lose track of time. And so I want you to learn that skill of being able to say how long your speech has been. And that comes from practice. It's another way to make sure that you practice your speech. Okay, there are 3 main areas that you're graded in. The first is introduction and conclusion. The second is organization and research. And then the third is delivery. Now, if you'll remember on Tuesday, I said I didn't really want you to worry about delivery because that's something I'm going to focus on. I will pay a little bit of attention to your delivery and give you tips on delivery. But as you notice, it's really not worth a ton of your speech points. It's the smallest category. So the substance is more important than the style in this speech. It's still important that you have it, but it's not the most important part. So going back up here, I want to go back to the top and remind you that everybody needs to provide an outline. You have to turn that in on the day of your speech. It needs to be typewritten, and you need to provide it ahead of time. If for whatever reason you're having a hard time typing or you can't have access then I may or may not make an exception, but you have to ask for that. You can't just turn it in as a photocopy of your handwritten notes and expect that I'm going to just take it. Please don't use your outline when you're speaking. What I mean by that is that I do want you to use notes. But what I mean by that is I don't want you to just read your outline word for word. There are 3 styles of delivery. The first style is a manuscript speech. Manuscript speaking is where you read the transcript, right? A lot of times politicians do this because they want to stay on message. You're not a politician. I don't want you to be worried about staying on message. You do need to stay on topic, but I'd like you to practice what we call extemporaneous speaking. Extemporaneous speaking is a style of speaking where you have prepared your notes, you are organized, you know what you're going to talk about, you might have bullet points, but you don't have everything written out word for word. So instead of saying something like you're reading, where you're like, the life of a lobster is a very interesting thing. When lobsters were first, on the earth, that was millions of years ago, and they are one of the crustaceans that live in the sea, blah, 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 right? Notice what's happening here. I'm not looking at the camera. I'm not looking at anybody. And my voice is kind of monotone. I also can't change inflection or like focus on a particular emphasis. It's harder to do that when I'm reading. By the way, I was fake reading, so I wasn't really reading, but I was pretending to read. But the idea here is that with extemporaneous speaking, you have bullet points, you've organized your thoughts, and you consult them. But you might have like bullet point 1 would be history of lobsters. 1, lobsters around for millions of years. 2, they're part of crustaceans. 3, and then you have the bullet point 2 would be like the history of eating lobsters, something like that, right? So thinking about you're going to do 2 outlines is what I'm trying to say. Outline number 1 is for me, and that's a full sentence outline. Okay, and that's what you're providing here. Outline number 2 is for you, and that's the one where you are doing speaking notes. Those are bullet points. That's it. Okay, so when I say you may not use your outline while you are speaking, what I mean is I don't want you to do the full sentence outline. I'm going to show you what that looks like, the one you turn into me. I don't want you to read from that paper during your speech. If you do, that's probably going to affect this category of delivery. Okay, so there we have covered the time limit, we've covered the outline, we've covered the different categories. I want you to also notice that the introduction conclusion is worth 35 points, which is almost half, and your organization research is worth almost the other half. So what I mean is I want you to think about in your introduction conclusion, I want you to think about how you're going to start the speech and how you're going to end the speech. But guess what? When you prepare a speech, that's the last thing you should be focused on. Meaning you should focus on the content first. This right here is what you want to focus on when you first start working on your speech. You want to make sure you have clear main points. You want to make sure you have an obvious order to those points. You want to make sure it's easy to follow you. Taking someone on a speech trip is like taking them on a road trip in your mind. You want to have a clear destination. You want them to figure out where you're going. You don't want them to be like, where is this headed? Where, oh my gosh, we're headed down a really bumpy dirt road that has terrible maintenance. We're going to get a flat tire. You don't want them to think that. You want them to follow it and to be entertained and to understand where you're headed. So you need to have good content, well-researched. Make sure you have qualified sources, which is why I'm recommending working with the library, having enough sources. And I want you to make sure that your evidence fits the argument. Meaning, if you're talking about, Area 51 in Aliens, you don't all of a sudden throw evidence out there about Bigfoot. Fine, that's pretty obvious. But you might actually have evidence that is only kind of applicable. You want to find information that's really directly relevant to the topic, and that your evidence supports it. The flow would be something that comes from practice, but also from organization, and then having a complete outline. So I'm going to stop the recording for a minute and take a quick break. Back to you again. Okay, so there is a draft outline that is due, and then there's a final outline. Okay, the draft outline is officially due tonight, which means I would like you to submit that. But if so many people here are in the what I call ideation stage, you're still like, I don't even know what my topic is, that I think I'm going to push that deadline to Tuesday of next week so that I give you the weekend to think about your ideas and your topics. So I'm going to change that deadline right after class. So you can go ahead and take some time this weekend or the rest of this week to think about your form, and then we'll talk more about what the outline should look like. Okay, so I'm back to the Moodle page now, and what I want to do is show you that there's a lot of files here for you to review in preparing for your outline. This is a great 2-minute and 30-second overview. Please watch that. Here's a handout on rules for outlining. Here's an outlining overview. Here's another link on how to outline your speech in 5 minutes. This is a 30-minute lesson on outlining. I'd like you to watch as many or as little of these as you feel comfortable in preparing your outline. So this is college. I'm expecting you to take the initiative to do what you need to prepare your outline. Okay. And all the materials right here. When you're ready, you're going to submit it here. This is a Turnitin document. What does that mean? That means that there is a plagiarism check in this file. That means that if you submit something that you have just found on the internet, or if you cut and paste too much material from a source directly, it's going to tell me, oh, this looks like it's coming too much from the internet. And I'm going to come back to you and I'm going to say, you need to revise this, which is why I have the draft and then the final outline, because I've found that a lot of times people haven't learned the importance of not plagiarizing. They don't realize that it's really important that they put things in their own words and that they don't just lift things from the internet. So just a heads up that that's why I have this set up the way I do, and that you really need to put things in your own words. You can't just lift things from the internet. Okay. So that's something that I'm going to have you guys do on your own. Today, what I'd like to do is watch a sample informative speech by Margaret, and then another sample informative speech by Josh. And then I'm going to have you guys talk about those speeches with us. So I'm actually going to pause the recording, because you guys, if you're watching this, you can go back and watch the videos on your own at this point, and then come back and watch the rest of the recording. So we just finished watching that speech by Julia. And the first thing I want to mention is, you may have noticed, that the sound faded in and out a bit. And that's because she did not have original sound on. And that's an advanced audio function. So if you're going to play music, or if you're going to do something on Zoom, you should know that the normal Zoom setting actually is set to eliminate background noise. So I don't know if you've ever noticed, but you might have been on Zoom and somebody's dog was barking and they're like, oh, I'm really sorry about my dog. And you could barely hear the dog. Like, you're like, I don't know why they're apologizing. I don't hear anything. That's because the normal default setting is to block out background noise. But the problem with that is music is kind of designed as background noise. Like, it goes up and down and fades. But so because Julia did not have her background noise, she didn't have original sound on. She had the default. You notice how it faded in and out? That was because Zoom kept thinking that that was background noise. And it kept like shutting it down. So that's just a tip. So if you are going to be somebody who's going to use music of any kind, I recommend turning off that background filter. And it's really quite easy to do that. Over by the mute button, there's a little arrow. And then next to that, it says audio setting. And if you click on audio setting, there is a place where it says turn on original sound. And that's what you want to do for your actual speech. Also, when you share your screen, if you are going to share your screen during a speech, there are two little buttons at the bottom of share screen. One says share sound, one says optimize for video clip. You want to click both of those when you share, because that way you can actually, it won't be as lagged and the sound will be the better quality for everybody who's watching. So those are just two tips if you're going to use sharing your audio with the class. So now that we've watched the two sample speeches and had a chance to kind of deconstruct them, I just want to emphasize that you are not required to present your speech with a PowerPoint. You're not required to use a visual aid for this speech. I would like you to try to do that for one of the two speeches, but if you do use a visual aid, there are specific requirements. First, I don't want you to use a lot of text. Please use no more than 3 to 4 lines of text, and the font size should be pretty big. And you don't want the text to dominate the screen. The thing I liked about Josh's speech is that he didn't put too much text. even what he put was borderline. So you want to have more image than words on a PowerPoint. The second thing you should know is that you should practice with the PowerPoint and practice the technology transitions. Especially if you've got music, you want to make sure that the link works. You want to try to find a way to show the link maybe without the ad. You notice that Julia's speech had kind of an ad next to one of her audios. So figure out a way if you can cue it up ahead of time. That would be great. I would like you to also run your PowerPoint by me if you're going to use one. So please send that ahead of time so that I can take a look and let you know if there's too many slides or too few, not too few slides. You don't want to put a slide up there and just leave it up there the whole time if it's only relevant for one part of your speech. That is something that can happen, and then people get distracted by the slide and they're not paying attention to you. And they just are looking at this image. So just a couple of tips for you in terms of using the slides with your speech. So last point, it is 10:45. We're going to wrap up, but I want to say that please check your email and or Moodle for the link to sign up for Speech Day. I'd like you to do that. Today, it's first come, first serve. You can take the weekend to work on your outline, but I will be expecting those due by Tuesday of next week. So look at the material. We've got a lot of supporting material for getting your outlines together. Feel free to email me if you have any questions over the weekend or the rest of this week about your speech topic, and I'll be happy to help.